It's a deeply antisocial principle because rights are not just individual, they're collective. And what may not have value to you today may have value to an entire, population, an entire people, or an entire way of life tomorrow. And if you don't stand up for it, then who will? And if you don't stand up for it, then who will?
Hi, I'm Elia Einhorn. Welcome to the Talkhouse Music Podcast. Here at the Talkhouse, we pair notable musicians for thoughtful, unmoderated conversations and release new talks each week. Regular listeners will have caught recent episodes like The Smiths' Andy Rourke and Dolores O'Riordan of the Cranberries discussing their new band, Dark, or Neon Indian with Chairlift's Caroline Polachek chatting over a live bed of their own ambient music. Check out these and all of our past episodes, and subscribe to get new ones on Stitcher or iTunes. Today's guests are synthesizer music legends Jean-Michel Jarre and Vince Clarke of Depeche Mode, Yaz, and Erasure, with an introduction by Gavin Russum of LCD Sound System. At the dawn of the 80s, Clarke made his name penning Depeche Mode's earliest singles, like Just Can't Get Enough, Dreaming of Me, and New Life. He left the band soon after, and with singer Alison Moyet formed Yaz, also known as Yazoo. They sent a number of songs up the charts, including club bangers Situation, Don't Go, and Only You. When Yaz split, Clarke formed Erasure with vocalist Andy Bell. Massive hits like Sometimes, Chains of Love, A Little Respect, Chorus, and so many more cemented the group's synth-pop legacy. All told, Vince Clarke is the writer behind records that have sold tens of millions of copies across 4 decades. He recently launched his own label, Very Records, and this month, Erasure releases the deluxe box set From Moscow to Mars, an Erasure anthology. Jean-Michel Jarre is a pioneer of melodic synthesizer music who has sold over 80 million records and performed to crowds of over 1 million on not one, but 4 separate occasions. His biggest concert ever, which landed him for the 3rd time in the Guinness Book of World Records, saw 3.5 million in attendance at a 1997 performance in Moscow. Jarre's breakout LP, 1976's Oxygen, which features 6 synthesizer pieces, helped bring electronic music to the masses. It's the highest-selling French record ever. He recently teamed up with what he calls his heroes for the 2-volume series Electronica, collaborating with some of his favorite artists, including Vince Clarke, Pete Townsend, and Laurie Anderson on last year's Volume 1, and Pet Shop Boys, Hans Zimmer, Julia Holter, and even Edward Snowden for this year's Volume 2. In addition, this month, on the 40th anniversary of Oxygen, Jarre released Oxygen 3. Clarke and Jarre are huge fans of each other's work. They came by my studio and over cups of tea jumped directly into deep synthesizer talk. Jarre said of himself and Clarke that
we're like 2 geeks. Talking about very specialized things for the listeners.
And halfway through their chat asked,
"Is it okay or is it too specialized?"
I assured him that no, it wasn't. It was fascinating stuff. Still, the talk does get technical at times, so I thought we could use a translator, someone who could take a few minutes to give examples of a handful of the synths that the guys discussed. I reached out to an artist that designs, builds, fixes, and plays them, and who is one of today's wizards of analog synths.
Hey, I'm Gavin Russum. I'm an electronic musician and composer and have done several projects, Black Meteoric Star, Deli and Gavin, Crystal Arc, and I am the synth player in LCD Sound System. This conversation between Jean-Michel Jarre and Vince Clarke is really incredible, and it just brings up so many cool points. And I, of course, also got into it because they just mentioned tons and tons of cool gear. But for those who may not be able to catch all those references, here's a little bit about why I think this stuff is so cool. I'm mostly going to be talking about analog synthesizers, although they do mention a bunch of digital tools as well. Because that's my area of expertise. A basic difference between analog and digital, obviously analog didn't exist as a term until digital came into existence because it was just the only thing. Analog basically means that you're actually hearing the sound of electricity. Electricity, when it becomes sound, is alternating current, which means the signal goes back and forth, which is what's described as oscillation, and an oscillator is the part of a synth that does that. So as the electricity is moving up and down, it goes through a wire into a speaker, and that speaker moves back and forth. That moves air, and then that moves into your ear and moves a little thing that's not that different from a speaker back and forth, and you hear the sound. Digital technology basically creates tiny pictures of sound called samples, and takes tiny little pictures of the wave at little microsecond intervals and then reproduces those through a digital to analog converter that then turns them into electricity moving back and forth and moves the speaker and then moves your ear. One thing that's really cool about this talk is that both guys make it clear that we're no longer living in a technological world where you need to choose between analog and digital music tools, that you can kind of use both, in interaction with each other, maximizing on the strength of whatever technology you choose for a particular task. You'll hear them talking about digital music technology in the context of Skrillex and dubstep and the plugin called Massive. So one thing that Jean-Michel kind of casually drops is a reference to the AKS when they're talking about the Buchla music easel. And he's talking about the EMS Synthi AKS. And what particularly I think he's mentioning is that it was a synth that you could carry around in a small suitcase. And the Buchla music easel is the same. It comes in a little suitcase. One great example of the use of the EMS Synthi actually comes from LCD Sound System. The EMS Synthi is a tool James uses a lot in production, and on Someone Great, when you hear that sort of background, it's really an excellent use of the Synthi.
I wake up and the phone is ringing, surprised as it's early, and that should be a perfect morning. That's all. Things are wrong.
Also, the Synthi AKS was Brian Eno's go-to instrument, and you can hear it on a lot of Roxy Music tracks. The Buchla music easel itself is a really interesting tool beyond the fact that it's compact and comes in a small suitcase. The most notable thing is that, as Vince talks about, it combines sound waves together to create more complex sounds, whereas other synths relied more on filters. They talk both about the Moog modular synthesizer and the Mini Moog. These were one of the big pioneer synthesizers, and Robert Moog really changed the entire world of music technology by introducing the concept of voltage control. The Moog modular is a big wall of modules with wires and interconnecting them and knobs to change different parameters. And you can hear it, the number one place, it is on any music really from the time that it was popular, but Stevie Wonder is like one of the most notable appearances. The Mini Moog basically was an attempt to take all that functionality and put it in a small package that musicians could play live. And my favorite Mini Moog appearance is the little synth solo in Magic Man by Heart that comes out of the guitar solo in this very magical way. One thing that comes up is a comparison between new modular analog synthesizer gear and old modular analog synthesizer gear, and Vince talks about Euro modules, and he's referring to Eurorack, which is a standard of putting synthesizer modules in a particular size package so that they can fit into what's called a Eurorack, which is a big rack that holds them. And in the last 10 to 15 years, there's been a huge burst of new companies designing these. And whereas in older synths, like the Roland System 100 that Vince also mentions, you could only use modules from a particular company, whereas with Eurorack, you can combine many modules from different companies all together and therefore curate kind of your own sound just based on the kind of music that you want to make. A good example of the Roland System 100 is Don't You Want Me Baby by the Human League. I can't think about an example of the Eurorack because it's used so widely, but Radiohead is definitely one of the big and more popular users of this kind of synth.
Take the money, run, take the money.
synth that they refer to as the beginning of the end, I believe, is the Yamaha DX7. It was so ubiquitous that at the time, mostly because the idea was to make something that was powerful, but commercially affordable and could do a wide variety of sounds. It used something called FM, which meant, that stands for frequency modulation, which meant it relied on combining sound waves together rather than filtering them out as the older analog machines had, similar to what we talked about with the Buchla. It was really geared on remaking classic sounds, brass, keyboards, organs, but of course it did it all through electronic technology, as they talk about, with mixed results. I think they call it the beginning of the end because it was just impossible to access the huge amount of power that was built into the synthesizer. It had a few knobs on the front and one little slider, so it was much easier to just choose the sounds that it came with rather than to build your own, as had been possible with the big analog machines. Jean-Michel mentions the synth that came before that and says the 9. I think he may mean the 1, actually, the Yamaha DX1, which was a beautiful machine of which very, very few were made because it actually had all of the front panel controls to access all of the different parameters of the sound that you could use. So instead of as the DX7, which was incredibly powerful, but basically you couldn't get into that power, you could really manipulate sound in a really detailed way with the DX1. It was incredibly expensive and incredibly heavy, so it didn't catch on. Whereas the DX7, which was affordable, became extremely popular. A few examples of it: "Shout" by Tears for Fears. Or Luther Vandross, "Here and Now" are places where you hear it very prominently.
Here and now, I vow to be one with thee.
Hope this little bit of synth translation has helped to open up this great conversation. And if you get overwhelmed by the storm of tech terms that come up, feel free to come back and listen again to get a little bit more detail. Enjoy this wonderful conversation.
I've always been a great fan of Vince because I found he's responsible. He should not be in the same room anyway at that stage. But I'm going to say what I felt from it. It's been always a great source of inspiration to me, because it's for me is really symbolizing this kind of British pop and rock meeting electronic music, and he's the one who defined the sound of British electronic pop, and with this kind of club feel on one side, and with a darker side in terms of melodies, and and we are sharing, I think, the idea that melody is the most important thing in music, probably.
Yes, I think so. Yeah, I think when I heard, you when I was very young, I think the thing that struck me the most was the fact that you played such an emphasis on melody. There were a few electronic kind of concept bands that were making electronic music and using electronic instruments, but I think that you really championed the value of melody and things that people could actually remember, as opposed to just getting into the technicalities of, this is a really clever sound. So.
And also, I think we are both geeks, and also we have we have this kind of naughty, silly relationship with toys, and especially analog synthesizers. We are sharing this kind of almost sensual organic approach to synthesizers, don't we?
No, I think so. Yeah, it's. To be honest, when I started making music, I didn't really appreciate the difference between analog and digital, and it's only in more recent years that I've began to hear the difference, really. You know, it's and also I think with using analog equipment, it's not just about the sound of it. It's actually the fact that you have to do something physically to make the sound. So you're not just getting a mouse and pointing at something on the screen. You're physically changing knobs. You're changing faders. You're connecting things and I don't even really now know what I'm doing, which I love. Because I think to myself, well, I'd really like a trumpet sound, and I try and get that trumpet sound, and it turns out to be something completely different. And I think hopefully that's what makes our music, you know, more interesting and unique.
Yeah, I mean the notion of accident you are talking about. I mean that with analog instruments you are always victim in a sense, but also exploiting accidents. What I really like, and I would agree with you. I mean, lots of people sometimes are asking us. I mean, do you prefer analog or digital? Do you make a difference? I think it's not the point, because actually I agree with you. Even I would say that even now, I think that if you want an analog sound, you go to an analog instrument. But if you go for a pure digital sound, you're not going to use a mini Moog, or you're going to use something else. And I found, I don't know what you think, but I found that probably quite recently, the last 4 or 5 years, the Atlas digital plugins are now becoming adults. They are stopping just imitating or emulating existing analog instruments. And frankly, if we are lucky, like we are, to have the original Mini Moog or ARP 2600, why using the emulated version or the digital version, except when you're traveling, because it's lighter. Sure. But it's not even the same sound. But which is great with quite lots of digital plugins, is actually you can do with these instruments things that you can't achieve with an analog instrument. So it's like two different type of instruments. Like if you take the native plugins, I mean, such like Contour or Massive, for instance, and it's interesting how instruments are generating styles. I mean, for instance, without Massive, dubstep probably won't exist. Sure. Or Skrillex won't exist in the same way, for instance.
Yeah. I mean, I think also there's a third thing, and that's the whole Euro-modular thing that's happening now. Because, you know, both you and I have many modular systems, and they're kind of basically the same. They work the same. You know, you connect the VCO to the VCF to the VCA. But now there's all these interesting young companies starting up that make modular systems where the modulations that you can do were unheard of back in the day. You know, so it's kind of almost a third wave of kind of interesting sound creation that wasn't available. You know, when the Moog system, the Moog modular came out, or when the Roland modular came out. And every single week, and there's a new company starting with a new idea. And you've got that analog sound, but the modulation possibilities there are more and more of those, I think, which is fantastic.
Yeah, it's really great that you are raising this point, because I really wanted to talk to you about this. So I'm really glad that you just pointed at that, because, I mean, at the same time as the digital plugins are growing, I mean, all the new generation now are discovering analog modules, and as you say, it's a total different approach than the original and the first modular synthesizers, such as the Moog 55 or the ARP 2500 or even the 2600, because actually the possibility of modulations are much richer, and actually also the fact that you can also blend and mix different modules from different companies in a kind of random way. I mean, it's very interesting, this kind of Brazil approach of analog modular synthesizer. Brazil, the movie, not the country, obviously. Yeah. And actually, I've never been. And it's a question I wanted to discuss with you, because I've never been that close of Buchla as a, and I know that you worked a bit.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, because Buchla was one of the very early systems.
Yeah, and then it disappeared more or less when we were involved, and then they came back again.
Yeah.
And I'm very interested by working with Buchla and with this music easel,
Yes.
It looks like an AKS, but it's actually 10 or 20 times more sophisticated, because it's actually with this instrument you can do what even a Moog 55 can't do. It's a very sophisticated machine, and I'm very into all this kind of and also circuits bend type of thing, because you can really create different sounds, and after a while you really don't know where you are, which we like.
Yes, yeah. I mean, it's because the Buchla system works on a different principle in so much as there's not so much filters and direct envelopes, but there's like cross modulation, and this was quite unique back in the, well, it still is, but there are actually Euro modules now that kind of emulate the way that works. And interestingly enough, a friend of mine who works in advertising, does music for commercials, that's all he uses, just Buchla.
Really?
That's all. So, you get these people from CBS coming to a studio and saying, well, we need a little sports thing that goes ba-ba-da-ba-da-ba-ba, in this section. And rather than go to the computer, find the trumpet sound, he does it the entire thing on Buchla.
Why?
I know, man. It's like crazy.
Wow.
And
That's very impressive
it sounds unique.
Yeah, sure.
It really does. I mean, the people from the advertising company have no idea what he's doing.
Yeah, sure.
And they wouldn't care if he just went to the toilet and made the sound. But, he just did stuff on the Buchla. And
because to control the beast is quite challenging.
yeah, and he's been doing it. I mean, he's been doing it for 25 years.
Yeah.
So in fact, the college that he chose to go to graduate was the only college he found in the States who had a Buchla system.
Yeah,
And that was the reason that he went to the particular college. I'll play you some stuff. I'll send you some stuff. It's really cool.
Yeah, please do. Yeah, because it's really, really interesting. And are you using a bit of these new modules or
Well, the
not
Eurorack
really?
stuff, I mean, I'm really getting into now,
The Dupfer and things like this?
Well,
or?
Dupfer, and also, but there are so many of these little tiny companies.
Yes, yeah, that's right.
And it's very, very cool. And like you say, I think that the beauty of it is the fact that you can mix and match these different manufacturers who have a different way of making sound. You can say, okay, you know what, I really like the envelope of this particular manufacturer because it's so fast and it's so hard hitting. But this filter of this company is just incredible, and it's lovely because they're expensive, but they're not that expensive.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I paid a lot of money for my Moog system, and I paid a lot of money for my Roland system.
Yeah.
But now people can build a system from a very small, from a very small start, and then they can build it and have an amazing system. And it's like the soft synths in so much as it makes music, or the ability to make those sounds, much more accessible to so many more people.
Yeah.
It's democracy, really, I think.
Yeah, it's right, because it's this resurgence of modular is like we could compare to the resurgence of vinyl in a sense.
Yes.
I mean, it's like going back. I mean, it's going back to a kind of vintage approach, but in the 21st century, which is absolutely different.
Yeah.
The relationship with the object, the fact that it's interesting that all young DJs actually are now discovering electronic music through modules rather than plugins, which is quite interesting because again, what you can do with modules and also circuit. I love also this circuit band. This kind of cheap Casio where you just have small cables and then you can do really some strange sound and also companies such as Teenage Engineering with their small OP1, there is a real trend and tendency today, to try to find cheap modules, as you said, which actually democratize the modular concept.
Yeah, and also I think it's I think that what attracts people and us to that whole world is the fact that is the unpredictability.
Yeah.
Because you get a modular system and there's no memory. in the same way that back in 1980 there was no memory on a
Absolutely.
System 100.
Yeah.
You know, so everything, in theory, every time that you make a sound, the sound will be different.
Exactly.
Unless you're going to take a photograph of which we used to do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Polaroids or
Yeah.
I mean, people. I mean, I couldn't agree more. I mean, in times that everything is so controlled, and in our society, I mean, everything is so politically correct, and everything has to be. I mean, we are surrounded by control freaks in our society. I mean, it's like if in music we were going back or reacting by the unpredictability of what you do, and it's there is a trap of having memories and presets, because for one moment I think we all became kind of archivists by going, even if we were intellectually against this idea, we were trapped by the desire of, just checking the presets. And when you have 1,000 presets, it takes half a day to go through them. And when you go to the 999, you forgot the 10 first. So
yes.
it's crazy.
Yeah.
And when you have to start from scratch, you will always, express who you are as a musician. So it's a great way. Also, the feeling that what you do is not going to last. What you do is in 1 hour is going to be different.
Yes,
and you have to take it and to record it really.
Yeah,
to grab it. It's like a hunt.
Yeah, I mean, I used to work when I started working with my partner Andy in the early days in the studio. We had a producer called Flood, and I would be messing about on my systems and that, looking for a sound that I liked, and then he would go, "Stop!" But it was too late. Already I had changed the sound, I changed the slider or moved the knob, and it was gone.
Yeah.
But I love that, I love that fact that you go in the studio, you write your song, you produce your song, you record your song, but your intention at the beginning of the day doesn't end up anywhere near sounding like the finished product, And I think it makes it interesting as well. I don't want to start making standard records or standard sounds or making sounds that I've heard already on someone else's record, which is the way that presets go. Especially, I remember when the DX7 came out, everybody seemed to be, that was, to me, was the beginning of the end.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I love this so much, this comment.
But it's true. It's like, everybody went through for the same bass sound because it sounded good. It sounded different at the time, but then everybody did it.
Yeah.
And for me, my re-interest in analog synthesizers began at that point, and I realised that, I don't want to do that anymore.
We could even compare the DX7 to the CD.
Yeah.
It's the same kind of, it's the dark age of digital.
Yes.
And suddenly when electronic music was approached with a Japanese brain, by saying, okay, we are going to go back, in a sense, to this old silly idea or silly concept of trying to say, okay, an electronic synthesizer is made to imitate acoustic instruments.
Yes.
So look at this great sound of a trumpet or this great sound of an organ or whatever, or clarinet. And obviously it had nothing to do with a trumpet or a real clarinet. But it created this kind of idea that actually a synthesizer is a fake instrument. It's not a real instrument because it just imitate real instruments.
Yes.
And I think the DX7 actually harmed and affected a lot in the people's mind what an electronic instrument did. Even if Brian Eno did great things with the DX7 because he's an instrument. I loved actually the DX9,
oh, yeah.
the one before, because it was just not entirely closed.
Yes.
It was not entirely finished. So as we know, we like. I always like commercial disasters in synthesizer. You know, I mean, because in all synthesizer were not. I mean, each synthesizer not being a commercial success, by definition, is interesting.
Right, yeah.
Because you have some mistakes in it and things you can exploit.
Yes.
And but I couldn't agree more. I mean, the DX7, I mean, killed Robert Moog and the ARP and all these great artists.
Yeah.
And people working in a room like we are now. I mean, small room and just doing that by hand. And suddenly that killed this kind of Romanesque almost approach of electronic.
But also, I think it was because it was so difficult to program or so complicated. It seemed it wasn't a hands-on instrument. It wasn't like something like you go for a switch or go for a button and things would start changing. You had to really think about it. So then you tended, well, I did, to go for like the presets, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean, to be able to program a DX7, you need to be an engineer.
That's giving me no reason. You know you're making me work so hard. That's giving me no, that's giving me no, that's giving me no, that's giving me no soul. I hear you calling. Oh baby, give a little respect to.
When I started, you have very few people being involved really in visuals. I mean, when I started, probably we had Pink Floyd and myself, and really involved in stage design and being obsessed by that. And then, as we know, everybody's doing it. And now so when I'm seeing some EDM festival, it reminds me of what I was doing 25 years ago, more or less. And now, obviously, with technology, it's quite like synthesizers. We were talking about that, and actually, it's very exciting because with technology these days, you can do lots of interesting things. It's the same thing, but after a while, as we know, it's the same for instruments. We are like two geeks. I mean, talking about very specialized things for the listeners, but actually, it's by the end of the day, it's how you use the technology that makes you. It's what you do with it. You know,
absolutely.
Everybody is using, I don't know, LED screens or lasers or lights, and it's all depending on what you do. Like synthesizers, it's the same thing.
So do you like synchronize your?
Yeah.
Is everything? Would you want to SMPTE or something? Or
yes, I'm really working with SMPTE. I mean, the system I have is actually I'm using a SMPTE code with just basic sequences that coming from us this time with Live Ableton, on which we are playing live.
Yes,
and then because I love the idea that actually in days where, I mean, being like between the rock band approach and the DJ. I mean, trying to take both of best world. I mean, really.
Yes.
So having the SMPTE code, I mean, to synchronize what. I mean, also playing the same 3 notes for 5 minutes is not that great, but then it's allow you to have a platform on which you can feel free, and also having also some parts without any time code at all, which is also nice.
Right.
That and then suddenly the lighting people and all that, they have to play with us. I love also this kind of. We were talking before about accidents. I think it's nice also on stage to play with this and having kind of alternate situation where you can have tracks really with time code and tracks without it. And I did one tour I've done. I mean, that was, I don't know, 10 years ago. I played just Oxygen without MIDI and without anything, like a jazz quartet.
Oh yeah.
Because Oxygen was on 8 tracks. So with 4 guys, we had 8 hands. So we were able to play everything. It was a nightmare because just with analog things and no MIDI, no time code, nothing. And actually, after a while, I mean, we had so many problems regularly that actually, instead of hiding them, we played with them, and the audience really loved it.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah, I think people like to see. I mean, on stage, you know, one of the things that we've always strove for perfection, but then you find that when you make mistakes, I mean, if Andy falls over on his high heels, people really warm to it because they suddenly see you as somebody that's not actually, perfect.
Yeah, exactly.
And people aren't laughing at you; they're laughing kind of with you.
Exactly. And partly if you play the game.
Yeah. But it's I'm not particularly a jazz fan, but I used to work with this engineer, and he used to say, and it's a terrible thing really, he used to say, if you make a mistake when you play keyboards or you play guitar, they just call it jazz.
That's great. That's very true, actually, in a sense. But it's very true what you're saying. People these days, are so obsessed with perfection. You do, I don't know, a TV interview, and you have a cable with a tiny microphone with a black cable and a black T-shirt. Who cares if you see the cable? But they will take 10 minutes to hide this bloody cable. It doesn't mean anything, and we are in. Well, technology is there, and people love that. They all love. Actually, if you have too many accidents, it's starting to
just a crap band.
But, yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's right. Yes. So you have to be just to survive just above that, above that level. But it's interesting because with this project, for instance. The track we've done together, Automatic, it's a track I really love, and I'm going to play it live and actually mixing, some time code with sequences, but also adding stuff on it, and maybe if maybe we are in the same town, the same night, we can join forces for that, because it's also nice actually to create some accidents also by adding things and doing something which more or less I more and more I consider the work on stage as something totally different from the album. It's like for me, what I tried to do this time is actually to try to approach the performance as a kind of audiovisual animal object where the visual is part of the proposal of the performance, to try to get away from this kind of series of video clip where you have a kind of narrative for each track, but more to try to create kind of depth and 3D type of effects. I'm not talking about 3D with glasses, but 3D like when we are doing mixing.
Yeah,
depth. That's right, and to try to find this depth for the visual rather, and also having a modular concept. That if we're talking just before this chat about one of the festival I'm going to do this summer at Jodrell Bank. Near outside Manchester. It's a quite strange dome stage, and then you have to make it fit. And so we are trying to get this kind of modular concept where wherever you are, it has to be different rather than having preconceived state. Wherever you are, it's going to be the same bloody show.
Yeah.
From A to Z, and I'm trying to escape from that. But as we know, it's difficult because it's more work. It requires more sound check or more things. But
Yeah. And the tour manager production manager just moans about it, complains.
That's right, everybody complains. You have a grumpy guy, grumpy atmosphere everywhere. But and also as you know probably, it's always very difficult. You have to create tensions because it's almost mathematics. So if you have a good show one day, you can be sure that the following night is going to be not a disaster, but something with lots of tiny problems. So I try to create when I felt that it was quite all right. I always try to find something really bad to create a tension and to create a kind of frustration that everybody will say, "Wow, let's be careful."
Yeah, I remember we did Andy and I from Eurasia. We did I think we're doing 12 nights in a very small venue in New York, and the stage set was basically like a jungle with trees and plants, but they were all inflatables.
Right, yes.
Okay, so all of the inflatables there's a pump at the back of the stage.
A
continuous pump that keeps these things erect.
Yeah.
And then halfway through one really emotional, slow song, the pump fails, and all these plants just slowly deflate. And people remember that. They will always remember that one particular show. Of all the 14 nights, the one that they remember is when the jungle collapsed behind us, and we're going like this.
but it could have been great as an effect.
It wasn't an effect. It was
quite poetic. I mean, suddenly having all this. If it was a slow.
Well, it was a bit kind of pathetic and sad, really. It was almost getting like, I don't know.
Yes, a kind of Monty Python type
yes,
of
in a Monty,
situation.
yes, exactly, yes. Yeah. In a sad kind of sexual way, it was all pretty...
Yes, a real down. A real downer. But what's because you've been involved in so many different projects in your life, Vince. I mean, so far. I mean, do you have any kind of because obviously in terms of all your different acts or your different projects, they have specific sounds. Are you also thinking about with your partners and the band? I mean, thinking about specific visual to it or specific.
Well, I mean, it's always been. I mean, one of the very first early shows that I did with Andy, he decided. And it wasn't a discussion. He just decided he would start wearing red tights or something. It was something, and it just felt really good and it felt really right. He felt really comfortable doing it, and immediately people took to it. People really warmed to it. We played lots of clubs and universities and in the early days, and gay clubs, and. I don't know. I mean, because we knew that there were just the two of us. We had two backing singers. There were just the two of us. There was no drummer. There was no guitarist doing the big, guitar solo or anything. So he felt that we needed to be bigger visually. So rather
as characters,
as characters, but as rather than rely, which we couldn't afford, lights or set, he took on that role and basically, ran about the stage like a lunatic, wearing. Pretty at the time, pretty outrageous clothes and stuff.
Absolutely.
But we always felt that. We always thought that we needed to be bigger than life because we weren't doing the whole rock, solo thing or anything. And there wasn't a drummer in the back,
So how did you manage to get? So you work with some sequencers or?
Well, back in the day, we were working the early shows. There was a sequencer called Yumi.
Yeah, I remember that.
It used to work with the BBC computer. So we used that and then I would play on top of that.
Yeah.
And then we did a show. Then I went off of MIDI for a while. So then we decided we'd go back to MC4.
Yes.
So I had two MC4s triggering synthesizers.
It was working quite well, that.
It worked really well. I mean, it was a bit scary.
Yeah.
Because obviously, when the power goes off of one of those things, that's it.
That's it.
That's the end of the show.
Yeah, that's right.
And that did happen to us a few times.
Yeah.
But what was cool about it was when that did happen, actually, was Andy just ploughed on.
Yeah.
He was a real trooper. He would just... I remember he went through a whole medley of Beatles songs on show because none of the technology was working, all a cappella.
Wow.
Just did it. Because he if it were me in charge, I would have said, let's get off the stage and just reset it and look cool and it will be fine, But no, he just carried on until everything was fixed, and people loved that because we made a mistake. It was a huge mess up, and we ploughed through, and people just related to that,
That's really nice.
It's that human.
Yeah, this human.
You
touch.
were saying about the difference between live and making a record. For us, that was always that interaction, that fallibility, you're kind of naked, really. Things can go wrong, and they do go wrong. And when they do go wrong, people still like it. In fact, they like it more, I think,
And how are you? Always wanted to ask you this. I mean, how do you remember the early Depeche Mode days? Because for me, when I discovered Depeche Mode, I mean, your sound was so strong, and then when you left Depeche Mode, I mean, the band went into a total different direction. I'm talking about the sound. I'm not talking about the songs or whatever, but the sound. And when you're looking back at that, what's your feeling about it? Because you had the kind of very specific sound that you carried with you, and then the Depeche Mode went somewhere else, in a sense.
I think it's well, I mean, really, it's down to the fact that the first recordings that we did were on 8-track, and we were playing that first album live, and there were 3 synth players and 1 singer. So that's pretty much is what ended up on the record. And then you get into 24-track recording studios, and it all changes.
Yeah, I think it's, once more the technique which defined, the style as always. Because it's I always thought that technology is dictating styles and not the reverse.
Yeah,
it's because somebody invented the violin that Vivaldi did what he did, or because of the 78 where you could cut only 3 minutes, that the single as a format on radio and jukeboxes existed as a format of 3 minutes, and Elvis songs were 3 minutes because you couldn't cut more than 3 minutes. It was not possible. And the same, like people like us, because of LPs, you could have songs not being trapped into a kind of 3 minutes pop format, and so on and so forth. And I was mentioning about Massive, for instance. I was really intrigued, and Massive, just this plugin, just dictated, just created the dubstep as a style, for instance. And it's very interesting what you said about the 8-track, because Oxygen, if it sounds like this, it's because it was done on 8 tracks, like Homework from Daft Punk. They had just minimal equipment, and it was just with 8 tracks, and this is the reason why it sounds. We know that less is more. We all know that.
But it's hard to go back.
Hard to go back to that. Yes,
it's really
it's
hard.
Very frustrating. It's, I think, the most frustrating thing. And I promised myself to do one project where I'm going to try to find a way to not technically allowing myself to go over 8 tracks, and finding just few instruments, and that's it.
Yeah,
I never did it yet. Each time I'm starting after a week or few days, I say, okay, let's go to 9 and 10 and 12 and so next time. and when with electronica, and also adding, working with so many different collaborators. People wanting also to. When you gave me some tracks, you had quite lots of tracks yourself, plus mine. Though it was quite, but we were quite serious about it together. But for instance, with Air, we ended with 100 tracks. Or something. It was ridiculous, and to make it. And then after they told me, "Oh man, it's your album. You have the final cut." It was they said that like a present, but it was a nightmare actually. It was to deal with this, and we know that less is more, and to make it sound coherent with lots of tracks is really difficult. Yeah. And I think we have the same. What I really like in the way you are approaching composition is you are working very vertical. You have a very specific. And working with you was a real pleasure. Discovering your track, because it's very, very, very organized. Very, and every sound is very. It's just it's almost a kind of I would say kind of Jackson Pollock approach to sound, where it's like pointillistic. Approach to analog synth, what I really like, where I'm more into layers and pads and all that. This is a big trap to get the dynamic after. I
found that, I don't know about your experience, but I've found that if I'm using analog equipment, I don't necessarily have to layer so much as I do if I use soft synthesizers. Because
really,
I did a Yazoo tour, and some of the original multi-tracks were damaged, so I had to recreate the sounds. And I found that, and I did it quite quickly, but I found that, if I had a Pro 1 sound, say, for instance, doing a particular melody, to get that same sound on soft synthesizers, I had to maybe layer it 3 or 4 times, just to get that richness. And it never sounded the same. But layering is, again, because of the technology, that's such an easy path to go down.
Yeah, and I think that it's a trap because by the end of the day, I mean, music is mono. It's all about mono.
Yeah.
I mean, a violin is mono. When I talk to you, it's mono. I mean, a flute is mono. I mean, and then we have this kind of silly stereo outputs on synthesizers. I mean, adding kind of fake chorus and fake. And you say, hey, you're trapped. You know it's wrong, but you do it because you love the sound, and then it's impossible to mix, and it's so crazy. And you know, I've been working with Jeff Mills for this second volume of Electronica, and he has also it's very interesting because he's working. Everything is live, and he's actually mixing everything, and the result of it is 4 tracks. But it's not even separate tracks. Everything so it's quite a nightmare. But in a sense, when it works, it makes your life quite easy as well. And everything is absolutely. He's playing everything. Even drum machine is like a jazz drummer. He's playing the TR. Now, I don't know if you saw him playing live, but it's really great. I mean, he's just released a DVD called Exhibitionist 2. Right. It's great. Quite impressive to see him. I mean, playing the TR-909 like a drummer. Everything is live, and he doesn't record anything. He doesn't sync. He's playing live on it. It's quite impressive.
Yeah.
And it's. I mean, this project has been for me a real dream because I've been in touch with people working in so many different ways.
Yeah.
I mean, that has been really great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been a real pleasure. I have to say, I've totally enjoyed doing the project. I mean, it's been fantastic, and it's been great to meet you, and I look forward to you cooking me a meal in Paris one day.
I mean, it's been also a real honor and privilege to be welcome the first time I met you at your home, and I didn't know what to expect, if you would be even interested working with me in this project, and I must say that we clicked entirely, not only because we are probably interested in the same gear on eBay, but furthermore, I mean, because we suddenly felt, I mean, through what we've done, we became kind of instant friends and creating instant friendship. So, I mean, you're more than welcome next time in Paris to share some special cooking from my hometown. I mean, I'm born in Lyon,
yes,
and because we are very chauvinist in Lyon, we think that it's the best place in the world for cooking. So I'm not a very good cooking, but I know good restaurants.
Fantastic, thank you. I look forward to it.
Take care, bye-bye.
Hi, I'm Elia Einhorn, and you've been listening to Jean-Michel, Jarre, and Vince Clarke with Gavin Russum of LCD Sound System on the Talkhouse Music Podcast. During this chat, Clarke mentioned a friend who exclusively uses the Buchla. Well, this friend, Reed Hayes of Reed and Caroline, just gave Vince, along with Dev Hines of Blood Orange and half of the band Savages, a lesson in that fantastic synth that you can watch at thetalkhouse.com now. Subscribe on Stitcher or iTunes for upcoming episodes like the Arcade Fire's Will Butler with Wyclef Jean discussing the Fugees' album The Score on its 20th anniversary, and Dan Deacon in conversation with Andrew W.K. Till next time.
They mentioned a fucking crazy amount of gear.